Now, moving on to climate change. Climate change represents a change in long term weather patterns. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that is IPCC, recently in its report stated that the climate change is real and anthropogenic factors are its main cause. Now, global warming. Global warming is the gradual heating of Earth's surface, oceans, and atmosphere. The increase in temperature is often the result of greenhouse gas effect caused by increased levels of gases like carbon dioxide, carbon chlorofluorocarbons, and other pollutants. As per IPCC report, the world is 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial levels. Now, impact of climate change can be seen in the bleaching of coral reefs, extreme weather events like heat waves and hurricanes, change in rain patterns, melting of ice caps leading to sea level rise, glacial lake outburst floods where a body of water contained by a glacier melts or overflows the glacier. Species extinction. Now, moving on to greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effects involves the following steps, which is step 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, high energy short wavelength solar radiations reaches the Earth's atmosphere. About 30% of the sun's energy is reflected directly back into the space by the atmosphere, clouds, and surface of the Earth. The rest of the energy is absorbed into the Earth system. The Earth re-emits energy in the form of infrared radiation back into the atmosphere at wavelengths longer than the incoming solar energy. Now, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere like water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases like HFCs, SF6, black carbon, and brown carbon absorb much of the long wave energy, that is the infrared radiation emitted from the Earth's surface. Thus, these gases prevent the energy from escaping the Earth's surface, leading to warming of the atmosphere. Now, the term carbon fertilization is often used in context of greenhouse gas emissions, which means high rate of plant growth due to increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, a heat budget is the balance between incoming heat absorbed by the Earth and the outgoing heat escaping from it in the form of radiation. If the balance is disturbed, the Earth would get progressively warmer or cooler with each passing year. Human activities like deforestation, vehicular emissions have disturbed the heat budget. Greenhouse gas emissions have increased exponentially, thus trapping more of the energy emitted by Earth due to greenhouse effect. This in turn has resulted in Earth's temperature to increase, leading to global warming. Now, fighting global warming is a challenge as we do not have appropriate alternative technologies. Also, developing countries like India lack funds to spend on climate-related research and technology development. Moving on, black carbon, commonly known as soot, is a solid particle or aerosol formed from incomplete combustion. It is released from biomass burning, cooking with solid fuels, and vehicular emissions, etc. Now, black carbon warms the Earth by absorbing heat in the atmosphere and reducing albedo when deposited on snow. This in turn accelerates the melting of glaciers. Further, it also disrupts precipitation patterns. Now, black carbon is a short-lived climate pollutant. Fluorinated gases like HFCs, PFCs, SF6 are emitted through a variety of industrial processes like aluminium and semiconductor manufacturing, substitution for ozone depleting substances, electrical transmission equipments, etc. Now, fluorinated gases have much longer lifetime compared to gases like methane and nitrous oxide in the following item. Like SF6 and PFCs have the highest amount of lifetime as compared to HFCs. Nitrous oxides is less, then comes the carbon dioxide and then methane. Now, nitrous oxide is naturally present in the atmosphere as part of Earth's nitrogen cycle. Natural sources include bacteria break down nitrogen in soils, while human-induced factors include agriculture, transportation and industry, fertilizer industry, and in production of adipic acids used to make fibers like nylon. Now, poultry industry also releases active nitrogen compounds into the atmosphere. Methane is emitted from natural sources like wetlands as well as human activities like agriculture, whereby anaerobic conditions associated with rice cultivation, livestock, industry and waste from home. It is much more harmful than greenhouse gases than CO2. Moving on to Global warming potential for a gas is the measure of total energy that a gas absorbs over a period of time compared to carbon dioxide. Gases with high global warming potential absorb more energy than gases with lower greenhouse global warming potential, thus contributing more to global warming. So the table goes for 100 years goes like CO2 is 1, CH4 is rated at 23, N2O has 296 GWP, HFCs have 12,000, HFCs 134A has 13, it should be 13,000, SF6 has 2,22,200. So mankind's overexploitation, misuse of natural resources, fragmentation or loss of natural habitat, destruction of ecosystems, pollution and global climate change is leading us towards the sixth mass extinction at a much faster pace than before. Moving on to ocean acidification. Ocean acidification is the evil twin of global warming and the other CO2 problem. It refers to the ongoing decrease in pH of Earth's ocean caused by uptake of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Other contributors of ocean acidification are acid rain, which can lower the pH of oceans. Eutrophication leads to large plankton blooms, where these blooms collapse and sink to the bottom of the oceans. The subsequent respiration of bacteria decomposing the algae leads to decrease in seawater oxygen and increase in carbon dioxide, and thus a decline in pH. Now, the impact of ocean acidifications are increase in acidity, depresses metabolic rates and immune response of some organisms. Survival of some animals having phytoplankton larvae will be adversely affected. Increased acidity leads to chloral bleaching. As the pH of ocean declines, the concentration of carbonate ions decreases. This makes it more difficult for marine calcifying organisms like corals and some planktons to form biogenic calcium carbonate. Commercial fishing is threatened because acidification harms calcifying organisms which form the base of marine food webs. Cloud seeding and formation of clouds will be also adversely affected. Artificial cloud seeding is the process of spreading either dry or more commonly silver iodide aerosols into the upper part of the clouds to stimulate precipitation process and form rain. Moving on to ozone depletion. Ozone is a natural gas and allotrope of oxygen consisting of 3 atoms of oxygen bound together. Now, ozone is found in 2 different layers of the atmosphere. Ozone in troposphere is bad as it leads to smog formation, while stratospheric ozone is good because it protects the life on Earth from harmful UV rays of the sun. The impact of ozone depletion is that due to ozone depletion, more and more UV rays are able to reach Earth. These harmful rays can cause cataracts, skin cancer, and impaired immune systems. UV rays can also damage sensitive crops such as soybean and reduce crop yield. This in turn can impact food supplies. Marine phytoplanktons, which are the base of ocean food chain, are also under stress from UV radiation and their productivity is declining. Now, sources of ozone depletion include carbon fluorocarbons, that is CFCs. These are used as refrigerants, propellants in aerosol sprays, foaming agents in plastic manufacturing, fire extinguisher agents, solvent for cleaning electronic components, and for freezing food, etc. Now, ozone layer depletion by CFCs. Ultraviolet light hits chlorofluorocarbons molecules such as CFCl3, breaking off a chlorine atom, leaving CFCl2. Now, this free radical chlorine atom attacks an ozone molecule, pulling an oxygen atom off it and leaving an oxygen molecule. That is, O3 is broken down into O2 and OCl. Now, OCl will attract another oxygen atom and this will continue the chain. So the summary of the process is that this would be the summary. And moving on, we have nitrogen oxides. The sources of nitrogen oxides are mainly explosions of thermonuclear weapons, industrial emissions, and agriculture fertilizers. Now, other substances like bromine containing compounds, which are called halogens, used in fire extinguisher, HBFCs, that is bromofluorocarbons, and methyl bromide used in pesticides and fumigants also destroy ozone. Each bromine atom destroys 100 times more ozone molecules than what a chlorine atom does. Now, polar stratospheric clouds are nacreous clouds containing water, nitric acid, or sulfuric acid. They are formed mainly during the event of polar vortex in winter and are more intense in the South Pole and Antarctica. Now, polar stratospheric clouds are source of ozone depletion because they support chemical reaction that produce active chlorine, which catalyzes ozone depletion. Now, ozone depletion is more over Antarctica than Arctic because there is very low winter temperatures in Antarctica stratosphere, causing polar stratospheric clouds to form. Now, impact of climate change can be seen in the decline in agricultural productivity and rise in food insecurity, water stress and water insecurity, rise in sea level, decline in biodiversity, and health issues. Moving on to climate change mitigation strategies. The mitigation strategies are carbon capture and storage, carbon sink, carbon credit, carbon offsetting, carbon pricing, geoengineering. So let's see these in details. So carbon capture and storage. Carbon capture and storage is the process of capturing waste carbon dioxide, transporting it to a storage site and storing it where it does not enter the atmosphere. Captured CO2 can be stored into artificial sinks, which are depleted oil and gas reservoirs, coal beds, deep saline aquifers, and underground mines. They can be natural sinks also, which is oceans, forest, soil, etc. Now, carbon sink is any naturally or artificial reservoir that absorbs and stores some carbon-containing chemicals compound for an indefinite period, thus lowering the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Now, carbon sinks include blue sinks. It refers to the coastal, aquatic, and marine carbon sinks like tidal marshes, mangroves, seagrasses. These ecosystems are found all over the continent except Antarctica. Now, green carbon refers to the carbon removed by photosynthesis and is stored in plants and soil of natural ecosystems. Now, Blue Carbon Initiative is an international cooperation between Conservation International, IUCN, and the Intergovernmental Oceanic Commission of UNESCO, focused on mitigating climate change through the conservation and restoration of coastal marine ecosystems. Now, carbon credit is a tradable certificate or permit representing right to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. The value of carbon credit varies according to market conditions. 1 carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide. The concept of carbon credit originated in the Kyoto Protocol of UNFCCC, an organization which produces 1 ton less of carbon or carbon dioxide equivalent than the standard level of carbon emissions allowed for its output or activity earns a carbon credit. Developing countries like India and China are emerging as the biggest seller of carbon credit. Moving on to carbon offsetting. Carbon offsettings are credits for reduction in greenhouse emissions made at another location, such as wind farms, which create renewable energy and reduce the need for fossil fuel powered energy. Now, carbon offsets are sold in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Moving on to carbon pricing. Carbon pricing is the cost applied to carbon pollution to encourage polluters to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases they emit in the atmosphere. There are two major types of carbon pricing. Carbon tax, which is a fee imposed on the burning of carbon-based fuels like coal, oil, gas, etc. Carbon tax intends to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by increasing the price of fossil fuels and reducing their demand. Now, carbon tax is highly beneficial due to its predictability, easier to implement, understandable nature, and lack of manipulation and other option of rebates. Now, emissions trading system, also known as cap and trade system, caps off the total level of the greenhouse gas and allows those industries with low emissions to sell their extra allowances to large emitters. Now, other mechanisms to price carbon emissions are result-based climate finance and internal carbon pricing. Now, result-based climate finance is a funding approach where payments are made after predefined outcomes related to managing climate change, such as emission reduction, are delivered and verified. Internal carbon pricing is a tool an organization uses to internally guide its decision-making process in relation to climate change impacts, risks, and opportunities. Now, Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition is a voluntary initiative of 34 national and subnational governments, 63 businesses from a range of sectors and regions, and over 82 strategic partners representing civil society organizations, NGOs, and academic institutions, etc. Now, the CPLC Secretariat is administered by the World Bank Group. From India, Delhi Metro Railway Corporations and Indian Railways are the government level partners. Moving on to Climate and Clean Air Coalition. To reduce short-lived climate pollutants like methane, black carbon, and HFCs is a voluntary partnership of governments, intergovernment organizations, businesses, etc., committed to reduce short-lived pollutants with over 120 states and non-state partners. It was initiated in 2012 by governments of Bangladesh, Canada, Ghana, Mexico, Sweden, USA, not India, along with UNEP. So India is not a founding member. Moving on to Biocarbon Fund Initiative for Sustainable Forest Landscape. It is a multilateral fund supported by donor governments and managed by the World Bank. It promotes and rewards reduced greenhouse gas emissions and increased carbon sequestration. Now, Global Climate Change Alliance is an European Union initiative which helps mainly small island developing states, that is SIDS, and least developed countries, LDCs, to increase their resilience to climate change. Moving on to geoengineering. Climate geoengineering refers to large-scale schemes for intervention in Earth's ocean, soil, and the atmosphere with the aim of reducing the effect of climate change, usually temporarily. Examples of geoengineering include capping a volcano. A volcanic eruption releases sulfur into the air, which in turn could block sun's radiation and cool the earth. Shooting mirrors into the space, this would deflect sunlight, thus reducing temperature. Seeding the sea with iron, it will stimulate the growth of phytoplanktons as they prefer iron. Phytoplanktons will pull CO2 out of the atmosphere through photosynthesis. Whitening the clouds, these clouds will then reflect the solar radiation and cool the earth. Cirrus cloud thinning and injection of sulfate aerosol particles, which are good reflectors of sunlight. Building fake trees. Artificial trees essentially would be a series of sticky resin covered filters that would convert captured CO2 to carbonate called soda ash. Periodically, the soda ash will be washed off filters and collected for storage. Now, moving on to the Indian initiatives for climate change. India's per capita greenhouse emissions is less than 1/3 of the world's per capita emission and far below many developing and developed countries. As per second India's biennial update report to UNFCCC, out of the total emissions, energy sector accounted for 73%, agriculture 16%, industrial products and product use accounted for 8%, and waste sector for another 3%. Also, 12% of the emissions were offset by carbon sinks of forest land, cropland, and settlements. India has proposed the following targets under the intended nationally determined contribution. Reduce emission intensity of GDP by 33 to 35%. This has been increased to 45% by 2030 from 2005 level. Achieve about 40% electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel based. This has been increased to, I think, 55% or 50%. Install capacity from non-fossil fuel based energy sources by 2030. Create an additional sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2. This remains the same. Equivalent through additional forest tree covers by 2030. Now, INDCs, that is intended nationally determined contributions, are non-binding national plans highlighting climate measures governments aim to implement in response to climate change and as a contribution to achieve the global targets set out in Paris Agreement of UNFCCC. Now, countries party to UNFCCC are asked to publish their INDC at 2013 United Nations Climate Change Conference held in Warsaw, Poland in 2013. Now, some of the observed climate and weather change in India include rising surface temperature, changing precipitation patterns, extreme weather events like heat waves, droughts, floods. Further, there has been an increase in Himalayan glacial melting, leading to rise in sea level. Now, the Hindu Kush Himalayan Assessment Report has been released by Kathmandu-based intergovernmental body, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. As per the report, 2/3 of the Himalayan glaciers, which is the world's third pole, could melt by 2030 if global emissions are not reduced. Now, NAPCC, that is National Action Plan on Climate Change. To counter the emerging threats from climate change, India released its National Action Plan to combat climate change. The national plan would include National Solar Mission, National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency, National Mission on Sustainable Habitat, National Water Mission, National Mission for Sustaining Himalayan Ecosystem, National Mission for a Green India, National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture, National Mission on Strategic Knowledge on Climate Change. Now, moving on to National Solar Mission. The objective of the mission is to establish India as global leader in solar energy by creating policy conditions for its deployment across the country. Now, mission has the target set for deploying 20,000 megawatts of grid-connected solar power by 2022, which has been revised to 1 lakh megawatts in 2015. The target will principally comprise of 60 gigawatts rooftop solar projects and 60 gigawatts through large and medium scale grid-connected solar projects. The mission has adopted a three-phase approach from 2012 to 13, 13 to 17, and 17 to 22. So we have just completed the phase 3. Moving on to National Water Mission, the mission has following goals: increasing water use efficiency by 20%, promotion of basin-level integrated water resource management, creation of a comprehensive water database in public domain, and assessment of impact of climate change on water resources. Special attention to vulnerable and overexploited areas involving citizen and the state for water conservation and preservation. National Mission for a Green India. The objectives include increased forest cover on 5 million hectares of forest and non-forest lands, improved quality of forest cover on another 5 million hectares of non-forest forest lands, which is total of 10 million hectares. Now, improve ecosystem service, including biodiversity, hydrological services, and carbon sequestration from 10 million hectares of forest, non-forest lands mentioned above. Increased forest-based livelihood income of about 3 million households living in and around forest. Enhanced carbon dioxide sequestration by 20 to 60 million tons in the year 2020. Moving on to National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. The mission aims at promoting sustainable agriculture through a series of adaptation measures focusing on 10 key dimensions encompassing the Indian agriculture, mainly improved crop seeds, livestock and fish culture, water use efficiency, pest management, improved farm practices, nutrient management, agricultural insurance, credit support, markets, access to information, and livelihood diversification. Now, major programs of the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture include rainfed area development, on-farm water management, soil health management, climate change and sustainable agricultural monitoring, modeling, and networking. Moving on to National Mission on Strategic Knowledge for Climate Change. Objectives of the mission include funding of high-quality and focused research into various aspects of climate change, measuring socio-economic impact of climate change, including impact on health, demography, migration patterns, and livelihood of coastal communities. Supporting the establishment of dedicated climate change-related academic units in universities and other academic and scientific research institutions in the country, which would be networked. Establishing Climate Science Research Fund. Moving on to National Mission for Sustainable Himalayan Ecosystem. It is a multi-pronged cross-cutting mission across various sectors. It contributes to the sustainable development of the country by enhancing of the understanding of climate change, its likely impact and adaptation actions required for Himalayas, a region on which a significant portion of India's population depend for sustenance. It seeks to facilitate the formation of appropriate policy measures and time-bound actions program to sustain ecological resilience and to ensure continued provision of key ecosystem services in Himalayas. It intends to evolve suitable management and policy measures for sustaining and safeguarding the Himalayan ecosystem, along with developing capacities at national level to continuously assess its health status. Recognizing the importance of scientific and technological inputs required for sustaining the fragile Himalayan ecosystem, the Ministry of Science and Technology has been given the nodal responsibility for coordinating this mission. However, this mission involves valuable cooperation from Himalayan states and Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Moving on to National Mission on Sustainable Habitat. The mission seeks to promote sustainable habitat through improvements in energy efficiency in buildings, urban planning, improved management of solid and liquid waste, modal shift towards public transport and conservation through appropriate changes in legal and regulatory framework. The mission will promote energy efficiency as an integral component of urban planning and urban renewal through 3 initiatives. The 3 initiatives are the Energy Conservation Building Code, recycling of material and urban waste management, better urban planning and modal shift to urban transport. It's aimed to address the need to adapt future climate change by improving resilience of infrastructure, community-based disaster management, and measures for improving the warning system for extreme weather events. Capacity building would be an important component of the mission. Now, the National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency aims to strengthen the market for energy efficiency through implementation of innovative business models in energy sector. Now, National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency consists of 4 initiatives to enhance energy efficiencies in energy-intensive sectors, which are as follows. Perform, Achieve and Trade, that is PAT, that is to improving efficiency in energy-intensive sectors. EEP, that is Energy Efficiency Financing Platform, providing platform for capacity enhancement to stakeholders related to energy efficiency financing. Now, FEED, that is Framework for Energy Efficient Economic Development, development of fiscal instruments to promote energy efficiencies. Market transformation for energy efficiency, accelerating shift towards energy efficient appliances. Moving on to Indian Network on Climate Change Assessment. INCCA was launched in October 2009 by Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change in efforts to promote domestic research on climate change and build on country's climate change expertise. Reports prepared by INCCA will form part of India's national communication to UNFCCC. India's initial NATCOM to UNFCCC has been initiated in 2002, funded by Global Environment Facility under its Enabling Activity Program through the United Nations Development Program, New Delhi. Now, Indian Network on Climate Change Assessment, second assessment report, that is Climate Change in India, a 4x4 assessment, examines the implications of climate change scenarios in 2030 using a regional climate model, that is PRISIS. This is the regional climate model, and MAGIC is the model used by IPCC. So 4 regions were assessed, that is Western Ghats, Himalayan region, coastal India, Northeast. 4 thrust areas were focused upon, that is agriculture, water, forest, and human health. Some of the possible impacts of climate change as analyzed by assessment report include warmer seasons, increased cyclonic disturbance, sea level rise, and changed precipitation patterns. Now, labeling program for appliances. Standards and labeling program for appliances was launched in 2006, and comparative star-based labeling has been introduced by Bureau of Energy Efficiencies, that is B. These stars ratings are given out of 5, and they provide information regarding energy efficiency of a product. Now, under this, appliances requiring mandatory energy labeling are frost-free refrigerators, tubular fluorescent lamps, room air conditioner, distribution transformers, color TV, CST AC, direct cool refrigerators, and electric geysers. Now, this is the description of the star label. More the stars, more the saving. It is also mandatory for DG sets. Moving on to Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which is a statutory body set up under Energy Conservation Act of 2001. It assists the government in developing policies and strategies with trust on self-regulation and market principles within the overall framework of Energy Conservation Act, with the primary objective of reducing energy intensity of the Indian economy. Now, Energy Conservation Building Code and ECBC was launched in May 2007, which addresses the design of new large commercial buildings to optimize the building's energy demand based on their location in different climatic zones. Compliance with code has been incorporated into mandatory environmental impact assessment requirement for large buildings. Building intended for private residential purposes only are not covered under the code. In March 2007, the conduct of energy audit was made mandatory in large energy consuming units in 9 industrial sectors. The Ministry of Power launched Eco Nivas Samhita 2018, which is an energy conservation building code for residential buildings. However, it addresses only energy efficiency of buildings. Water and other aspects are not covered under it. Other initiatives that promote energy efficiencies in building is LEED, GRI, Indian Green Building Council, Energy Efficiency Index 2019, India Cooling Action Plan. So under LEED, that is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, Green Building Certification Program worldwide developed by non-profit US Green Building Council. GRIHA, which is Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment, is a national rating system for green building developed by TERI, the Energy Research Institute. Indian Green Building Council, that is IGBC, is a part of Confederation of Indian Industries, that is CII, developed the green building rating system. Now, Indian Green Building Council also organizes the annual Green Building Congress, its flagship event on green buildings. B, along with Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy, that is AEEE, recently released the State Energy Efficiency Index 2019. It tracks the progress of energy efficiency initiatives in states and union territories based on 97 significant indicators. Now, B launched UNNATE, that is Unlocking National Energy Efficiency Potential, in 2019 for accelerating energy efficiency in India. Moving on to Indian Cooling Action Plan, it was launched by Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change. Now, ICAP, that is Indian Cooling Action Plan, aims at reducing cooling demands across sectors by 20% to 25% by 2037 to 38, and cooling energy requirements by 25% to 40% within the same period of time. Now, moving on to electric vehicles. To promote electric vehicles, government launched the following initiatives, which is the India's Electric Vehicle Mission 2030, National Electric Mobility Mission, FAME India, Automotive Mission Plan 2026. So, India's Electric Mission 2030 aims to have all electric fleet of vehicles by 2030. I think it's for government vehicles only. National Electric Mobility Mission. It aims to have national fuel security by promoting hybrid and electric vehicles in the country. It targets 6 to 7 million sales of hybrid and electric vehicles year on year from 2020 onwards. FAME India, that is Faster Adoption and Manufacturing of Hybrid and Electric Vehicles in India scheme. It is part of National Electric Mobility Mission Plan and has been launched by Department of Heavy Industries, the Ministry of Heavy Industries and Public Enterprise. The scheme has 4 focus areas, that is technology development, demand creation, pilot projects, and charging infrastructures. Now, Automotive Mission Plan 2026 aims at bringing Indian automotive industry among the top 3 in the world in engineering, manufacturing, exports of vehicles and components, growing in value to over 12% of India's GDP and generating additional 65 million jobs. Now, recently, Government of India launched FAME India Phase 2. It will be implemented in the period of 3 years, that is from 2019-20 to 2020-21. The main objective of this scheme is to encourage faster adoption of electric and hybrid vehicles by way of market creation and indigenization. FAME Phase 2 aims to achieve the target of more than 30% electric vehicles by 2030. So, under FAME 2 mission, which is being implemented for 3 years, we have a budgetary support of 10,000 crores to support approximately 7,000 e-buses, 5 lakh e-3-wheeler passenger cars, 10 lakh e-2-wheelers, and creation of charging infrastructures. 670 new electric buses sanctioned for Maharashtra, Goa, Gujarat, and Chandigarh under FAME 2 project. 241 new charging stations sanctioned for Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Gujarat, and Port Blair. The government released charging infrastructure guidelines for electric vehicles. Its major provisions are promoting private participation in charging infrastructure. No license will be required for setting up a public charging station by an individual or entity. It will be rolled out in 2 phases. Phase 1, that is 1 to 3 years, will cover all megacities with population above 40 lakhs and associated expressways and highways. Phase 2 will cover states and union territories. Central or state electric regulatory commissions will determine the tariff for supply of electricity to public charging stations. Charging stations have been allowed to source electricity from any power generating company through open access. Moving on to National Initiative on Climate Resilient Agriculture. The ICAR has launched the National Initiative on Climate Resilient Agriculture during 2010-11 with an outlay of 350 crore. The initiative will primarily enhance the resilience of Indian agriculture, covering crops, livestock, and fisheries. The initiative will involve strategic research on adaptation and mitigation. Accordingly, sponsored and critical research grants will be provided to fill research gaps. Now, Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Act of 2001 aims at an effective system for IPR protection of plant varieties and rights of breeders, including farmers. The protection period is 15 years and 18 years in case of trees and vines. The objectives of the Act is to recognize and protect the rights of farmers in respect of contributions made by them at a time in conserving, improving, and making available plant genetic resources for development of new plant varieties, to accelerate agricultural development in the country, protect plant breeders' right, stimulate investment for research and development in both public and private sector, or the development of new plant varieties, facilitate the growth of seed industry in the country. Now, a farmer is entitled to save, use, sow, resow, exchange, share, or sell his farm produce, including seeds or variety protected under the Act, without brand name. Now, zero budget natural farming is a natural farming developed by Subhash Palekar. It is a type of farming in which there is no use of chemical pesticides and agriculture is carried out in an eco-friendly manner. This helps in restoring soil fertility and organic matter. Zero budget natural farming reduces the cost of production down to zero due to utilization of all natural resources available in and around the crop. The International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food Agriculture, also known as Seed Treaty, aims at guaranteeing food security. Let's look at the 4 pillars of zero budget natural farming. The first the first pillar is the Beej Mitra, which is seed treatment. Jeev Mitra, which is not using any fertilizers, not using any pesticides. Mulching, that is soil, straw, and live compost. Then we have WASP, that is soil moisture. These are the 4 pillars of zero budget natural farming. Now moving on to the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, which is also known as the Seed Treaty. It aims at guaranteeing food security through conservation, exchange, and sustainable use of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. It was adopted in the 31st session of Conference on Food and Agriculture Organization of UN in 2001. Now, climate smart agriculture involves farming practices that improve farm productivity and profitability, help farmers to adopt the negative effects of climate change and mitigate climate change effects. Now, Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture was launched in September 2014 as a multi-stakeholder program platform on agriculture, smart agriculture, climate smart agriculture. India, though a signatory of the alliance, was not involved in its creation, so India is not a founder. Examples of climate smart agriculture include increasing the organic content of soil through conservation, tillage, using crop residues to cover soil surface, and adopting crop rotation, following a landscape approach in agriculture like integrated planning of land. Now moving on to adaptations for smallholder agriculture program is administered by International Fund for Agriculture Development. The program aims to channel climate and environmental finance to smallholder farmers, scale up climate change adaptations in rural development programs, and mainstream climate adaptation into IFAD's work. Moving on to Svalbard Global Seed Vault, which is located in Norway, is a state-of-art seed protection facility famously called Doomsday or Apocalypse Seed Bank, or Noah's Ark of seed banks. Now, India's seed vault is located at Changla, Ladakh. It has been built jointly by Defense Institute High Altitude Research, that is DR, and National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources under aegis of DRDO. Now, moving on to National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change. Now, National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change is a central sector scheme which was set up in 2015-16 with the aim to promote adaptation activities which mitigate the adverse effects of climate change. Now, the project related to adaptation in sectors like agriculture, animal husbandry, forestry, tourism, etc. are eligible for funding under NAFCC. National Banks for Agriculture and Rural Development, that is NABARD, is the implementing agency of the scheme. The Clean Energy Cess or Coal Cess was abolished in 2017 with the introduction of Goods and Services Tax. A new cess on coal production called GST Compensation Cess of 400 rupees per ton is put in place. The cess is used to raise revenues for National Clean Energy Fund. That'll be it.